A very good morning to the respected judges and my co-presenters. My name is Dr. Tanvi, and the topic of my presentation is retropupillary iris claw lens versus scleral fixated lens using Gotex in children with large subluxation. So the management of subluxated lenses varies from optical correction in low grades of subluxation to the removal of the lens and intraocular implantation in higher grades. So following lens removal, the management of resultant aphakia could be either by anterior chamber IOLs, iris claw, which could either be prepupillary or retropupillary, and scleral fixated IOLs, which would either be sutured or sutureless. So at present, there is paucity of literature which documents the safety of Gotex suture in pediatric eyes. Also, there is no consensus on which of these techniques is the best for early visual rehabilitation in children. Hence, we undertook this study to assess and compare the functional outcome of retropupillary iris claw IOLs versus sutured scleral fixated IOL using Gotex in children with large subluxations. Also, we wanted to compare the IOL tilt in the two groups. So the study was conducted over a period of 1 year. It included 28 patients with large lens subluxations of more than 7 clock hours. They were randomly divided into two groups, both of which underwent pars plana lensectomy and vitrectomy, followed by the implantation of retropupillary IOL in group A and SF-IOL implantation using Gotex in group B. So the primary outcome was assessment of the best corrected visual acuity in logMAR, and secondary outcomes were assessment of the IOL tilt, mean change in astigmatism, and the median operating time. All these parameters were calculated at 3 months. So the inclusion criteria included all the patients in the age group of 6 to 18 years with large lens subluxations of more than 7 clock hours. Any patient with gross iris abnormalities, gross anterior or posterior segment trauma or pathology were excluded. So the surgical technique in group A involved marking the horizontal meridian at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, followed by the creation of the pars plana ports and a pars plana lensectomy and vitrectomy. This was the pars plana lensectomy vitrectomy. The retropupillary iris claw IOL that we used was this one, and the arrow shows the iris claw mechanism where the iris tissue was enclaved. A superior clear corneal incision was created, followed by the insertion of the retropupillary IOL into the anterior chamber, after which they were held by the lens holding forceps, and it was slipped posterior to the iris and enclaved using the Sinskey hook in the mid-peripheral portion of the iris, which is the least vascular and the least mobile. And a peripheral iridectomy was created. This is at the end of the surgery. In the SF-IOL technique, the horizontal meridian was marked, followed by the creation of the pars plana ports. So both the ports were created 5 mm apart, and the distance from the limbus was at 3 mm. This was the SF-IOL that we used with 4 eyelets. So the Gotex suture was cut into 2 halves, and each half was threaded through the adjacent eyelets of the SF-IOL. A superior clear corneal incision was created, followed by insertion of the IOL into the anterior chamber, and then the sutures were passed into the anterior chamber and externalized through the respective sclerotomies. After ensuring IOL centration, these sutures were tied and the tension was titrated. So we observed at the end of 3 months that the best corrected visual acuity was slightly better in the SF-IOL group as compared to the retropupillary group. However, it was not statistically significant. The IOL tilt was measured by a technique described by Loya et al. Using the ultrasound biomicroscopy technique. So the distance from the iris pigment epithelium to the anterior surface of the IOL was measured, and superiorly and inferiorly for the vertical meridian and nasally and temporally for the horizontal meridian. So if the difference between the two values was more than 100 microns, it was considered to be a significant tilt. So we noticed that in group B, the number of tilts of more than 100 microns was higher as compared to group A, but it was not statistically significant. There was a significant change in the post-operative astigmatism from the pre-operative value in both the groups. However, post-operatively, they were not statistically significant difference. However, there was a statistically significant difference in the mean operating time between the two groups, with group B having a mean operating time of 90 minutes and group A having one of 40 minutes. So this is a patient of clear lens subluxation who underwent a retropupillary iris claw IOL implantation. As we can see, these are the enclavation sites, and the IOL appears to be centered. This is a patient of a lens subluxation with a cataractous lens who underwent an SF-IOL implantation. As we can see, the lens is stable and centered. So the choice of IOL to be implanted in children is a challenge, as early visual rehabilitation with minimal complications is the ultimate goal. So if we compare the RP versus SF IOLs in terms of complications, retropupillary is associated with complications like spontaneous disenclavation, pupil ovalization, which is not vision threatening, and pigment dispersion in secondary glaucoma because rubbing of the IOL against the posterior pigment epithelium. SFIOLs, on the other hand, are associated with an increased intraoperative manipulation, especially at the vitreous space. Therefore, complications like retinal detachment and suprachoroidal hemorrhage can occur. Also, there's a higher risk of IOL TIL and suture-related complications like suture erosion, breakage, and eventual late IOL dislocations. Comparing the advantages, retropupillary iris claw IOLs are technically simpler with lesser complications, and hence they have an early visual recovery. SFIOLs, on the other hand, are not dependent on the integrity of the iris tissue. Therefore, they can be implanted in conditions like aniridia and traumatic mydriasis. Also, the IOL is placed in a more physiological position. Hence, I'd like to conclude that both the techniques provide good visual rehabilitation in children. However, retropupillary, being a technically simpler procedure, could be recommended in patients with Marfan syndrome, high myopia, and presence of peripheral retinal degeneration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think two things. Could you clarify two things to me?
Yes,
Can you hear me? One
Yes,
thing
sir.
is that taken visual acuity as the primary outcome measure.
Yes, sir.
Now, some of these children could also have amblyopia. So, did we look at that status of about amblyopia?
Yes, sir.
And
We did
other
look
thing-
at this.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, sir. So we did look at the amblyopia part. Many of the patients did not get vision. So the most of these patients, the age group was 6 to 18 years. So they were cooperating for Snellen's visual acuity in the form of E-charts. So most of them did not gain vision up till 6.6, and the average visual acuity that both the groups almost attained was between 624 to 660. Some of them didn't even get 660. So these patients were given amblyopia therapy post-op.
But you should have looked at the history, how long that problem, the cataract has been there, because that would probably give you some window into, how much amblyopia could have been there. I think that could have probably given you a better perspective. And the other thing about, did you compare the tilt with the astigmatism, which you said that
Yes,
there was?
so we did compare the tilt with the astigmatism, and we found the astigmatism to be higher in the SFIL groups, which had more tilts. But it was not a statistically significant difference, sir.
And did it change with follow-up as the healing process took place? How long was your follow-up?
So my follow-up was for 3 months in this particular study, but I have followed them up for over a year.
Okay.
So the tilt and there is no late IOL dislocation, and the tilts have remained the same.
And it did not change with time, the astigmatism which you found in initial post-operative period vis-a-vis what happened later.
So the astigmatism did not change, but the refractive error changed, sir.
Okay.
Some of them had a change in the refractive error at the end of 1 year, as compared to 3 months.
So that change was, why that change was there? Because of the age, you think, or there was some other reason?
So it could be because of the age, and so some of them also given occlusion therapy, sir, for amblyopia.
Okay. And did they improve with occlusion therapy? Those who were given occlusion therapy, did some of them show any improvement in visual acuity or no? Because most of your age group was 6, 18.
Yes, sir. So not the 18-year age group, sir. There were 2 patients in retropupillary group who were at 6 years. So they showed an improvement in the visual acuity. So in SFIOL, the ones at 6 and 7 showed a slight increase, sir. If they were 636 post-op, they increased to 618, but nothing beyond that.